Welcome everyone to the first episode of season 4. I believe we're on. Same host, more gray hairs. What are you gonna do? So same rules as always for those people. Actually, we're blessed tonight. We've got probably 12 different states being represented tonight, which is kind of cool. Got a couple presenters from Nebraska, so that's kind of neat. Some new audience members, new questions. 4 questions. If you put them in the Q&A and not the chat, as per usual, we're giving out gifts for best questions. So this week you get to choose. If you're in Nebraska, you might want a hat. If you're in Manitoba today, a toque might be the best option. So make sure you're putting your questions in the Q&A and not the chat. We got a few Covers and Co team members that are in the chat and gonna kind of direct questions our way. I got my main man behind the screen. Trav is also going through questions and going to feed them to me. So make sure you get your questions in. So we're going to introduce the panelists here right now, you guys, if you want to turn your videos on. Miles, maybe we'll start with you. You're a seasoned vet on the webinar. So I should just introduce everyone. So Miles, Logan, and Doug. So Miles is coming from Alberta. Miles was actually on our cattle market outlook last winter at this time. And Logan and Doug are actually coming to us from Nebraska. So kind of nice. We get a different perspective. And I see Miles is doesn't have a screen on. The guy's probably on the phone, if I'm being honest. But Logan, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, just giving us a bit of a history of your farming career, and then obviously the topic that we're going to be talking about tonight, just some marketing strategies that you have done on your farm and kind of what's worked and what you're planning for the future.
Sure. Well, I'm fifth generation at Wine Glass Ranch. I'm in this business with my wife, and my dad and my mom are still around. We're a fairly traditional cow-calf stocker operation. One thing that's a little bit unique about us is that we vary over 10 years what industry segment we're in. So 5 out of 10, we're mostly cow-calf, and then 5 out of 10, we're mostly stocker. And right now we are mostly cow-calf. We're probably 80-90% cow-calf. The yearlings that we run, we send to Wyoming. We are planning on selling about half the cows this winter and getting back into stockers the following year. Some other things about the farm and ranch, kind of broadly speaking. We do cow-calf stocker. We also do dryland farm ground as well. Grow a lot of cover crops. We're about 1/3 of our acres are cover crops annually, and it really allows us to flex the stock that we run, essentially. So we kind of grow onto our cover crops. We also use different leases and whatnot, but they really kind of allow us to grow. We grazed off our dryland corn crop this year, kind of with the way prices were, and the price to get at harvest. We decided that, hey, there's just a lot more value in grazing it off. And we do graze dryland corn occasionally. My dad started experimenting with irrigated corn grazing in the early 2000s, and we do kind of have a grazing specialty. Run a lot of corn stalks. So one of the unfair advantages we have in Southwest Nebraska, we have a lot of farmers with a lot of irrigated corn. They don't have cows anymore, so we seamlessly have like an endless supply of corn stalks to winter on. And one other kind of unique thing about me is I grew up on the ranch, and I knew when I was about 18 that I wanted to return. And my mom and dad required that I leave Nebraska and agriculture for 10 years. So I went to school in California, studied economics, and then I went to work in the Silicon Valley area, lived in San Francisco, and did some financial and accounting consulting for 5 years there. And 2 months short of the 10-year window, my dad called and said, hey, there's an opening on the ranch and we'd really like to have you. So I didn't quite meet the 10 years, but I sure came close. So I do kind of have a little bit breadth of knowledge before I came back to the farm. And my wife's from Huntington Beach, California, and been here almost 13 years now, and farming and ranching full time. And that's 10,000 foot view of Logo Pribina.
How tough was it coming back after 10 years?
I was ready. California is a great place to spend your 20s, but when you start thinking about family and, building a nest, Southwest Nebraska is a great place to do it versus California.
How much connection did you have back with the ranch when you were in California?
Really not much. I had a full-time job and I would come back occasionally and help out, but really not much at all, to be honest.
Oh, well, that's a cool story. I think I'll talk about maybe well, I guess how far are you and Doug geographically located, Logan?
He's in the kind of the opposite end of the state. We're not really not that far. How far are we, Doug? A few 100 miles?
Yeah, it's a few hours, probably 4 hours.
Well, maybe you guys, this is probably a good time to kind of introduce the climate. So obviously a lot of the people that are on tonight, it's Western Canada and they are getting snow tonight. Doug, maybe introduce yourself and kind of your farm. And it would be interesting to get just a little bit of understanding as far as what you guys are doing from a winter forage standpoint, or if there is any winter forage that you guys put up. So why don't you take it away, Doug? What just a little bit about your background and some of your marketing strategies.
Sure. So I grew up in southeast Nebraska. It was a multi-generational farm. So if I was part of the family farm, I would be the fifth generation, but we haven't done that yet. Uh, Pretty similar to Logan. About the time I was freshman, sophomore in high school, I made up my mind I wanted to raise cattle for a living. But everybody told me, you can't make money raising cattle, got to go to school, get the degree, benefits, yak, yak, yak. I dropped out of college about my third semester just to focus on riding bulls, which for me was probably better than being in school because I learned a lot about myself. But I met a guy when I was rodeoing.
Oh, God, I'm in. Thanks.
So, sorry, had some technical difficulties. Go ahead, Doug.
So anyway, after I quit rodeoing, his dad called me and he says, "Hey, we can buy cattle out of southeast Nebraska cheaper than we can buy them here." And they were up in northwest Iowa. And so he introduced me to Ann Barnhart's blog, who at the time was teaching the sell-by marketing schools. And so I got really interested in that. So I went to one of her schools, learned the sell-by marketing, started buying cattle for myself. I think it was about 1999. So I've been doing this for 25 years. Didn't learn the sell-by marketing until a few years after that, but that is all I've done since. So I bought into the family cow-calf operation, but I started my stocker deal is my own business. The stocker thing blew up. That's why I'm not a part of the family farm, and eventually ended up buying dad out of all of his cows. I went 100% all stockers, and now I'm transitioning back running more cows, but I will not give up running stockers. The cash flow's way too good.
Cool. So what does the farm look like today, Doug? And maybe paint a little bit of a picture as far as what you're doing for summer forage, fall forage, winter forage, just for the people.
Sure. So when I started, I didn't own any land. I had to lease everything. So I had the traditional lease. You're out there in the summer, come off in the fall. So I've got some backgrounding pens that I built, and that's where the cattle are during the fall, winter, and early spring months. And so it's just pretty much your typical feedlot type scenario. Everything gets fed a TMR, corn, silage, ground hay, that kind of stuff. And then in the summer, the cattle that I own will go to grass. I do the rotational thing, pigtail poly wires. I move about every 2 to 3 days, based on the water situation. And yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Cool. Well, Miles, I'll see if I can get your mic on. I may have to ask for.
There we go.
There you go. Cool. So, Miles, why don't glad to have you back.
Yeah, good to be back.
Miles, for those of you, there are, I was saying off the start, there's lots of new people on the webinar tonight. These guys have brought in some American crowd, but why don't you give the people an introduction of who you are? I know you're very well known in Western Canada, but give us a little bit of a understanding for those who've never met you, kind of a bit of your background and describe your operation today.
You bet. So right here where we're at, we're about 85 miles east of Edmonton, about 100 miles or about 60 miles off the Saskatchewan border. Small little town by the name of Beauval in Alberta. My grandfather, his dad before him, kind of started here, and it got in the in the 20s. It was pretty tough. Lost it. My grandfather kind of bought back in, and bought a fair bit of land. And him and his wife Sadie kind of got it rolling. Then my dad and his wife Rita kind of come on and had 3 kids. And I always wanted to farm. I was the youngest by about 7 years. So I went into the auction business and worked in the city, bought horses for different outfits, and always dealt horses all my life and owned cows. And then my wife Melanie she's a veterinarian. She had a mobile practice right out of home here for 20 years before things kind of went awry with BSC. And right after BSC finished up, cattle were worth some money. So a lot of producers got out. She looked after 15,000 mother cows in our part of the world when she was in practice. And when BSC ended up at about 2010, those numbers were down to 3,000. So then she said, well, she went to work in Vermilion for a little while at the vet clinic. And then now she works for Zoetis. We have 2 kids, my son, MJ, his wife, Kara, and their little son, Corbin. He's 20 months old. They got a baby on the way here for December. They ranch with us. He's got an ag finance degree. She's got a crop tech degree out of the U of A. My daughter, Michaela, married Braden Bach, and he's the head rodeo coach at the Vermilion College. And we all ranch together, and we're all we're very close. Coffee at 6, breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, supper at 7, and we do stuff together. We run about 250 mother cows, and that fluctuates a little bit, at about 170 horses. We export a lot of horses, saddle horses, driving horses, teams, and I'm in constant contact with people in both the cattle industry and the horse industry. So we sell a lot of horses into the US especially. Spent a lot of years, like over 35 years in the auction business, and still do a lot of charity and fundraising auctions for schools and hospital foundations. We do a lot of things for local communities. I sit on the Alberta Beef Producers as a board member. My wife was chair of the Alberta Beef Producers for a couple of years, 2 years back. I sit on the Canadian Cattle Association and the Environment Committee and the Animal Health and Care Committee. I sit on the Verified Beef Plus, so on the management committee on that side. So heavily vested in cowboy politics, we like to call it. I sit on the North Saskatchewan Watershed on the environment side of it, so I'm the only agriculture representative on that group. So right now, working very closely with the environment minister and the environment ministry to plan the next 70 years in our watershed. So we normally sell steers around the first week in September. We listed in Southern Alberta Livestock with Al Lively, and we probably started that about 8 or 10 years ago whenever he started. It was always seemed to be the best time to market steers. We would hold on to heifers till spring normally, and then kind of move them out, sell them as replacements, and or keep a bunch of them, just depending on how it worked. And the last couple of years, we've been selling our heifers and buying bred cows. So we've been moving that direction. We were a little worried about maybe the market staying. In 2015, we had one good year. So we wanted to make sure that we could sell calves into these markets that we're still holding tight. It looks like heifer retention, I think what most people think is that it requires about 40%. Once you start, holding back about 40% of the heifers in the country, then you can kind of grow your herd a little bit. But right now, I think those numbers are still in about the 30% range. So I don't believe that a lot of people are growing their herds. A lot of the individuals, especially, you just doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter what part in the country. People are 50 to 60 years old, and that's kind of the mean age. And so they're looking at these numbers, and you're seeing cull cows that are enormously high. You're seeing bred cows that are really high, calves that are, prices like we've never seen, $25,000 to $3,000 spring calves. So a lot of guys are stepping out and not growing the market. So I think that almost covers quite a few things. And
Well, Miles, that's great. Yeah, I'm going to give you the opportunity to answer this first question. I guess for those,
Okay.
for Doug and Logan, I'm going to try and do the conversion rates for everyone. The Canadian dollar is about $1.40. Canadian dollars get you $1 US. So for whoever's watching north or south of the border, that is the conversion rate today. And you can just pick the presenter and know where they're coming from and do that conversion yourself. So basically, the number one question that we were getting you guys, and maybe Doug, I'm gonna finish with you because I know you're a sell buy focused, and I think that's going to segue perfectly into our next question. But basically, we're getting two questions: do I sell the cows because they're at all-time high, or should I go big and actually be expanding the cow herd? So Miles, maybe we'll start with you, and then Logan, I know you've got some interesting transition going on. Be interesting to hear your perspective, and Doug, we'll finish up with you.
I talked to a couple of gentlemen today. We were out kind of paying for some hay we had bought, and that's a question he asked me. He said, "What do we do? Do we retain heifers? Do we expand?" And I said, rule of thumb over the last number of years, my grandfather always said when cattle prices were high, you didn't have to sell as many. You could retain some heifers back. You could grow your herd when when prices were high. And that way you could still make your payments and still do your things, that you need to do. I know most of us are maybe towing the line a little bit on that, but like I was telling you earlier, we had heifers in open heifers in almost $2,700. If we can buy some breds at 3,000 or 32, it looks like, middle-aged cows from 26 to 3,200, really good cows to 4,000, and heifers, we talked about it at being close to $7,000 on some really high sides. So, expansion is going to happen in some spots. I know the young folks see these calf numbers and our calf prices and think that it's a pretty darn good time to do it. How long it's going to last? Like I said, we're still not retaining many heifers. So are we a year or 2 years down before we start to grow the cow herd and it starts to the numbers start to hurt the industry? Who knows?
Cool. Logan?
No, you do never know, what's the right thing to do. And I'm really excited to hear Doug's answer. I'll just give you a little bit of perspective. We are selling cows in March. We're going to sell 1,400 of our good cows, 5 to 8s. We do this about every 10 years, try to pick the tops. We haven't always got it right. Even when you don't get it right, it's still a nice cash liquidation event for us. I will tell you, kind of like what Miles said, this isn't 2014, where we retained a pile of heifers in a matter of months. It seems to be very different fundamentally with the boomers retiring, and there's a dispersion cow sale at Ogallala anyway, which is the biggest barn in Nebraska. There's a dispersion cow sale every time they sell cows. So it's going to be different this time around. And as to whether or not you need to expand or you need to not expand is completely up to you, your forage resource, your age, and there are 1,000 other reasons. I don't think there's a good blanket answer.
Cool. Doug?
So I kind of will echo what Logan said, that yeah, every time you have a female cell, there's always dispersals. So we've been being foretold about this generational, that I don't want to say is there's going to be the wealth transfer. And we're starting to see that take place here in the States right now. So as you mentioned earlier, I'm a sell by marketer. And for people that don't know what that is, to really boil it down, we capture our profit when we buy, not when we sell. So I'm always examining relationships. And, I've been texting and emailing a lot of Canadians that have been in my marketing schools this past week. And the Canadian market is always pretty similar to the market in the States. these bred females and pairs are really overvalued to the open heifers. And another thing that we're seeing take place right now that is unusual is the open pound cows are overvalued to replacement heifers. You can sell that open cow for $1,600-$1,800 US. You can buy the 5 weight replacements for $1,400 to $1,500. That's a relationship that typically doesn't exist. Now, one thing that's always worked really well for me is when everybody else is running out the front door, you try to find a window to crawl in, the contrary thinking type mentality. And I'm hearing a lot of guys talking about getting out of cows, getting into stockers, and other guys are getting out of stockers and getting into cows. So there seems to be no consensus on what everybody thinks we ought to be doing. But the thing that's kind of got my attention right now is, since I'm an author and I write that Doug's Market Intel that you can find on Beef Magazine every Friday, I pay attention to what other authors are writing, and I'm noticing a trend as they're talking about feedlot placements is signaling that there is no herd rebuilding taking place. And so they're forecasting high prices all the way out until 2028. The reason that gets my attention is when you get enough authors start to echo that same talking point and everybody starts to believe it, that does become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It gets everybody thinking the same way, which then when the herd gets rebuilt, it tends to be overbuilt, and then that leads to a market crash. So I think we could probably see something like that going forward if everybody subscribes to that thinking. The thing they probably will get wrong is the date.
Yeah, nobody, well, we had a ton of feedback or questions coming in from the attendees that are on. Everyone wants to know how long they can hold the cows for and the right time to sell. We are by no means gonna wait into that conversation. I don't think it's fair for you guys, but hey, if all of us knew that information, we would just execute on that. So Doug, I want to follow up with you because there has been a ton of conversations, people that, I mean, we're out on the road and we get asked about sell by marketing all the time. It seems like it's the hot topic on the cattle podcast. And we get a lot of young producers that are interested in cover croppings that are on this cover cropping that are on this webinar. And I'm curious, one of the attendees asked a question, what's the best advice you would give for somebody who's just starting ranching right now? I'm wondering if you'd tackle that question first, Doug, and then maybe we'll go in reverse order if that works. But the best
Sure.
advice you could give to somebody who's just starting out.
If you're a Stockman Grass Farmer subscriber, I got a 3-piece series that's running right now, and there's like 30 some bullet points for a beginning farmer. The one that I would put the most emphasis on is to learn sell by marketing, because when you start out, you're young, you're broke, you don't have any money, so you have to generate cash flow. That's the only thing that'll keep you alive. That's why sell by marketing works so well, is it does generate cash flow. So I would definitely start there.
Logan?
I would agree with Doug on that. If you're just getting started, you need to own animals. You need to own more animals, and you need to own more things that appreciate and grow versus rust, rot, or depreciate. And if you take that sell by school, you're going to know what to buy to get started. I'd also echo that, you need to, and I kind of hit on it before, but what I see a lot of young people is they've got a dually, they've got 3 horses, they've got all sorts of equipment, and then they've got 50 steers, and it's just way overbalanced. And just make sure that your overheads and the stuff that depreciates, just make sure you own more assets that appreciate in value, stock, versus the ones that depreciate in value.
Miles? Oh, sorry, Miles. I got you muted. You're muted, Miles. You're going to have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yes, there you go. You didn't give me that deal before. So buy land was a thing I've always thought about. Buy land or rent land or whatever you can. Property is the best investment you can make as far as a young person growing up. If you can get somebody to help you, and then you can put the cows on and do what you need to do. But buying land is the biggest thing, or trying to, and leasing land, getting relationships with people in your community. And boy, there's these marginal pieces. There's a lot of grain farmers in our part of the world that have little bits of pasture here and there. And if these folks can get on, or these young people can get around and rent these properties, and there's some great cattle buyers that'll help them out and get the right type of cattle to fill those spots. And like you said, you got to have something that'll appreciate in value and not rust and depreciate on a big thing. I know land can as well, but it's still the best investment there is, and cattle and horses are the next.
So I wish I took that advice when I was 20 years ago, you guys, when I was starting out. I'm learning these lessons now. So guys, we've been a new hire of ours, our Manitoba territory manager. His name's Connor English. I'm sure he's on, and hopefully Connor, some of the links and stuff, if you wouldn't mind putting them in the chat, that'd be great for people. But Connor has kind of opened my eyes to this sell by marketing. And he's been doing something that I just think so interesting. He's been buying undervalued cows that are in dispersal herds that are late, taking those animals to pasture, calving them out, and then selling pairs. And he's done really, really well this year, and then buying back in more desirable animals into his herd. It just makes so much sense. I wish I had a strategy like that 20 years ago when I first bought my cow herd. And Doug, since you're the expert on the panel on sell by, I'm curious what you've seen as far as other opportunities, and maybe we'll go Doug, Miles, and Logan, just opportunities that you have captured, similar stories like that in the marketplace of swapping in or being able to buy in a undervalued animal and bring back something in more desirable into your herd.
So many opportunities. I could take the rest of the night just talking about it.
Well, let's hear a few.
I've been doing sell by marketing now for 20 years, and I just can't recall a time that there are so many opportunities with so much margin built in. And we're kind of in the fall calf run here. That tends to open up quite a few more, but you could do heifer to steer trades. I like feeder bulls. They're what I call the forced equity trade, because the minute you castrate it, you got to steer. You can add, 30, 50 cents, 100 value, just by changing him. The one and done cows, which are, the old cows, you give them the privilege of having one more calf. She raises a calf, you wean the calf, kill the cow. With the kill cow market being where it is, you can buy those cows under their intrinsic value. And when you wean that calf, you have a really cheap calf because there's so much value in that cull cow. You can do a lot of value capture just by trading females in different gestation periods. Like you mentioned, sell the pair, buy back other breds. You can sell cows that are in the third trimester, buy back cows in first trimester. Huge, margin, in that. And I could go on and on and on, but that gives you an idea of a few of them that are happening right now. And that's the other thing. I should mention this: sell by marketing will only tell you what you can and can't do to prosper right now. It is a real-time cash flow reckoning. So when you learn how to do the algebraic equations, you can see what you can do or can't do right now. If you have undervalued animals, you just hang on to them and wait. The market does have a way of coming around to you and saying, okay, now it's your turn to sell your cattle. And when that opportunity comes, you need to take it.
Doug, I'm assuming this is a more complex answer than the time I'm going to give you to answer it, but what goes into that formulation of figuring out what is overvalued and what is undervalued?
So with the stockers, it's pretty straightforward. When you go stocker to stocker, breeding stock to breeding stock, it's pretty straightforward. You need to know the weight and the price of the animal you sold, the weight and the price of the animal you're buying back. And you need to know your cost. And when I say cost, it is cost of gain, not cost to keep on stockers, because that's a weight gain business. You use the cost to keep, which we use a monthly charge on the breeding stock because, breeding stock aren't gaining weight. So that's why we do the change there. The one that's a real monster is if you want to go from stockers to cows or cows to stockers, because you need to know the stocker formula and you need to know the breeding stock formula, and then both of those have to converge to make a comparison. So that one can get a lot of people lost in the weeds the first few times they do it, but really it's fourth grade math.
Maybe for you. Miles, how about you? Something you see, I mean, and this can be geography specific, so like something in Alberta, or what you're seeing as far as what's undervalued.
Well, when the temperatures really get cold, late winter, early spring, we bought red cows in that time when, the market's sales aren't quite as good, and we capitalized on that. And, good sheds, good bedding, good feed. We've also bought cow-calf pairs. This time of year, there's just not as many of them in this part of the country. Most people don't want to go into the winter with a calf or with 2 or 3 or 400, 200-pound calf or less at this time of year. But, there's been a lot of profit in those critters. And keeping separate, like our own herd, we don't mix anything. Even if we buy cows and breed them, or buy cows, calve them out and breed them, we don't mix them with our own cows till we ship calves. And then, even though they're on the same vaccination program and everything, that's one thing with, you got to keep stuff separate. Married to a veterinarian, she will not let me mix and buy and sell to that extent on the cow side of it.
So Logan, you want to take a stab at that? I want to ask a context specific to you question just about, we've had a lot of questions about background in calves and should I sell now? Just kind of what process goes into it for you guys as far as when making that decision. So I guess the first question is the undervalued, and then just want to get more specifics about how you make that decision about either selling cows or bringing in backgrounders.
Sure. So we're just the way that we are right now. We're all cow calf. I'm not in it like Doug is and seeing the undervalued. I did run a Western Nebraska value gain calculation, and finding something that's undervalued in Western Nebraska right now is difficult. I'm not studying the relationships currently, though. I've been to Doug's school, and when we go to stockers, we are going to do a lot more of that. So, but just undervalued right now is hard to find. But like I said, I'm not looking at those on a day-to-day basis like Doug is. But I'll tell you, just macro-wise with the planning the cow sale, read Knowledge Rich Ranching by Alan Nation, and he lays out this plan. So the cows that we're going to be selling here in March, we bought them in 2019 and 2020 for about $700 as a heifer calf and developed them. I do not have much into them, and we identified in 2016 that we were going to start buying heifer calves right around 2019, 2020, and executed on that and developed that and kind of grew the cow herd. It tends to be a 10-year cycle. Drought and COVID really accentuated the lows, and I met with my dad, and we actually were a year earlier than we initially anticipated, just because of the way when we were able to buy them. Essentially, we want to sell the ones that we bought for in 2019 and 2020. So roughly planning on going back into stockers here for about 5 years, and then 2030 invest in heifers and do another dispersion cow sale in 2035, and we pay very close attention to the macro, and it's very hard to get right. Am I going to hit the top? I don't think so, but I've got a hand to play, and we're going to play it.
So Logan, I think it's interesting, I guess, to me, when you had brought that up before we'd let the attendees in, talking about the 10-year livestock cycle. I wonder if you could chat a little bit more about that. And I'm curious the other guy's perspective, how much they consider that or follow that. I don't want to call it a theory. I don't want to demean it, but obviously there's some numbers behind it, but maybe just dive into that a little bit more if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Our operation, I think, utilizes it on a larger scale, and this isn't the first time that we've done it. We've been doing this for about 30 years. My dad really started it. He convinced me it was my idea this time around though, and have been running with it. I just reread over the weekend, kind of knowing we were going to go on this. I just reread another Alan Nation book of Land, Livestock, and Life. And Alan Nation really said there are seasonals and there are relationships, but you need to be hyper focused on where you are in the cattle cycle and how to position yourself within the cattle cycle. And I know a lot of other, like Gordon Hazard, and there's some other people that are not as focused on the cattle cycle. Bud Williams, as Doug said, the only market you have is the market today. So there are competing viewpoints on this, and I'm not saying this is absolutely the way to go, but it is pretty reliable. Wade Chody in 1974 in his book Swapping Tracks wrote that this thing tends to come in a 10 or 11-year cycle. He was hemorrhaging money at the time trying to ride the cattle cycle down, and it was kind of his diary, and it was very fascinating to read. But I think that's kind of the first mention of it that I've been aware of. And Alan Nation, Harlan Hughes is another guy that wrote about it. He was in the Stockman Grouse Farmer, then he was in Beef Magazine, and now I catch him on some different things. He's really hyper aware of where we are in the cattle cycle. In fact, as we were trying to track this out, and I'll end with this, but in 2019, in June of 2019, Harlan Hughes said a heifer born in the year 2020, developed in 2021, would be the most profitable cow of this cycle. And he wrote that in 2019. And no one cares because people are more focused on, well, I want to be rich by 2020 next year. What can I do? But we tend to be very focused on the macro and manage our business accordingly.
Miles, you want to take a stab at that? If you're familiar with it, of course.
No, that, some very important, very important views. When I was first starting out and running some cattle, 1998 was one of the best times that we sold calves, but then with BSC, it really threw a wrench into it. So 2015 was the next most profitable time. But now we're going to 2025. So yeah, it is running in a 10-year cycle when everything, is beating to the right drum. So very, very interesting. Love to hear your point of view. That was fantastic.
So that means for everyone listening, the cattle market's going to tank 2028.
Yeah, well, that's what's said by Joe, nobody else.
Doug, wondering kind of with your marketing style, if you pay any attention to the 10-year cycle, or kind of what your I guess longer term strategy is.
Well, I have to pay attention to it because it's what everybody talks about. The 10-year deal, I don't pay any attention to that. My bills hit my mailbox every month. I don't have a decade to try to come up with a marketing strategy to pay my bills today. But the thing that I find interesting, and you mentioned podcast earlier, and I just roll my eyes at the things that are said on podcasts today, especially when it comes to sell by marketing. But if you look at these trends that they talk about, and you have this 10-year average, in a month and a half from now, the year 2014 falls out of that average, and that will change that 10-year trend line. If you look at the 5-year trend line, anybody that believes in that needs to explain away the months of August, September, and October to me, because what happened in that 90-day period wasn't supposed to happen. And so next year, again, in a month and a half from now, that 5-year trend line is going to change dramatically. And then in another year after that, when 2020 falls out of that 5-year average, it's going to change dramatically again. So when we talk about cycles, I tell the people that come through my schools, I can't ignore that they exist, but I'm going to ignore the 10-year cycle. If you can spot those smaller cycles that happen about like every 20 days. If they happen, they don't always happen, but if you can spot a 120-day cycle or something like that, by all means, take advantage of it. But always be ready that this time around, it's not going to happen the way that it has been happening. And that's why I always come back relationships, relationships, relationships. As long as you're selling an overvalued animal, you do your math correctly, you build the barn card right so you can identify your buybacks, you will make money.
So the strategy, like as far as sell by goes, whether the market's at an all-time high or we're back to depressed, it's about generating cash flow.
I sold probably 80% of my grass calves a week after we hit the 52-week low this fall. And that was the most profitable trade I have ever done in 20 years as a sell-by marketer. And I probably have to explain that. When you sell stockers, you sell weight, and you replace them, you buy weight. So what matters is the ratio of dollars to pounds on that weight difference. That relationship was so wide. That's why that one was my most profitable trade that I've ever done.
Well, I want to branch out to some topics that the audience is asking as well, guys. I'm just going to take 1 second to pop up my screen. Hey, Logan, I got a specific one for you here. Comes from a regular listener, no pressure. Logan, could you expand on how you build your breeding stock after selling cows next spring? Are they bought in? Do you retain heifers? How are you investing in what you sell in 10 years?
Sure. So we'll sell out. We're selling our good running age cows, age dispersion. We still will keep cows around. If you do run stockers, it's great to have a cow calf herd to kind of be the cleanup deal for your whole stalker deal. So we will go retain our herd. One thing that we do is even when we are shrinking, we retain every heifer every year. We use the Tykert method where we just if we want a few replacement heifers, we'll turn them in for as little as 14 days. And it's a stalker program on our replacement heifers. We do not feed them. We don't try to get 90% bred. When we put the bulls in for 14 days, we'll get about 40, maybe 50% bred. When we're trying to grow, we'll put them in for longer, like as high as 45 days, in which we'll only get, I think it was 75% bred this year. We want that fall out early in that stalker herd for a lot of reasons. One is generate cash flow, and you can sell that female as an open feeder heifer. The last thing you want is to have her come open as a second calf heifer before she's entered the cow herd. And so what we will do is we retain our core genetics, but when we do want to grow and we want to grow fast, we will buy heifers and develop those heifers using our program. So we shrink our cow herd and we kind of hum it along at a low pace. And when we want to grow, we do grow very rapidly in a year or two, and we expose all of our home raised for a longer period of time, and then we will purchase heifers off ranches and expose them as well.
So what is your, once you have executed on a cow sale this fall, will you buy in stalkers or will you start to custom graze? Or I guess
No, we'll buy in stalkers. And the first thing we're going to do is we grew a lot over that period of time. In the last 4 years, we've grown a lot. Taken on leases, we do a lot of feeding in other people's feed yards to kind of maintain our numbers. And we're going to pull back a little bit. And first thing we're going to lose is we're not going to work with as many feed yards on a custom basis. So we're going to pull in and shrink a little bit. But yeah, we will just run stalkers. Occasionally, I will run some custom cattle for a neighbor that we've got that's a feed yard just to kind of fill some grass numbers. But by and large, we will just be running stalkers after we sell the cows.
Cool. Miles, I think I got one kind of directed in your direction here. What are your thoughts on the current calf price in comparison to future price when they'll be finished? I just went through this strategy with a friend of mine who's helping me kind of navigate the livestock price insurance up here in Canada. And we're not finding a lot of profit in the backgrounding and finishing side of things. I'm curious your thoughts and what you see.
On the live cattle side, yes. There's a lot of export market on this beef side. And I think that's where the money is being made on a lot of the slaughter cattle. I know there's a lot of slaughter cattle going stateside, and then lots of it doesn't even stay in on the export side. It goes straight to be exported and not even on markets because these guys retain ownership right out of Canada. So that's where the big money is coming from on the feeder side, on the live cattle side, and on the beef itself. That's where the money is. So there still is some money on it. I know if maybe the small feedlots that are just buying these cattle right now and trying to do it, you can't really price insure them. But if you were slaughtering them all and selling the beef, you certainly could. So it's on the beef export side of it where the money is going to be made. Does that make sense to you?
Sell the cows.
Yeah.
Or the steers anyway.
Yeah.
Doug, I think this one's directed towards you. Hopefully you can, this makes sense to you. Could you speak to the length of time that you could possibly turn or trade cattle to generate cash flow and profit with your management style? So the length of time you could possibly turn or trade cattle to generate cash flow.
Oh, you could turn them as quick as they become overvalued. It could be a week. Personally, I don't do that. I use the word trade because that's what we're doing. We're selling this animal and buying another one. But, in the States, we have kind of a slang term, cattle traders is kind of, doesn't have a very good reputation. So what a lot of times I do is I will rebrand all the stocker cattle that I buy, and I don't sell anything until that brand is peeled. That way buyers they can buy with confidence that I'm not trying to slip something by them that I bought maybe earlier in the week. They can look at those cattle, judge for themselves how long I've owned them. We're running a legit program, vaccinating them, utilizing all the heifers. I'll guarantee every steer that I sell is a steer, as I do buy a lot of feeder bulls. So typically, for me, a quick trade is going to be 45 days. I bought some that are, I buy what I call a lot of the scratch and dent type cattle that, have a lot of cosmetic issues, and it takes a little time for those cattle to, the word I use is bloom up, where they will show well when you resell them. And, so them cattle usually take a little longer. So I feel like that's kind of a wishy-washy answer. It all depends. But, hopefully that satisfies whoever asked.
He's a no one anyway. He's never on this. No, he is. He's not getting the hat tonight, though. I'll tell you that. So this is a question from Chris for all. Maybe we'll just do it in reverse order if that works, guys. For all, thoughts of after breeding heifers for 30 days, identify the opens and then turn the bulls out, I'm assuming with those opens, with the intent of selling pairs next October, November. Doug, do you want to take a stab at that first? And then we'll go Logan and Miles.
There was a Canadian came through my school a couple years ago, and he was texting me his numbers, and he did that, I assume he turned the bull out, but he's like, I got all these opens. And I'm like, man, right now opens are a good thing because it's paying to put weight on these animals. So he could sell his opens and buy back replacements, and then he's going to sell the bred heifers as breds, which, man, and that they're overvalued here in the States. They're really overvalued in Canada. So he can sell them breds and step back into the stocker market, basically buy anything he wants to buy. So, I mean, there's some monster relationships there. You mentioned pairs before I logged on here. I was watching a female sell on the internet, and oh my gosh, what some of those pairs were bringing, even the short, solid, and broken mouth cows were knocking on the door of $3,000
For cow calf pairs, like fall calf.
for a cow calf pair. Yep.
And that is overvalued. I guess I got a follow-up question just on specifically for you, Doug, but we'll spin it around to you guys. At what point do you trigger a sell? Like, do you have a number in mind when you're buying those cattle?
you do not sell an animal unless you already got the replacement identified. So if you can find a replacement animal for anything you have in inventory, you could do the sell by right then.
Cool. Logan, I guess I'm not sure if that was the right order, but they're wondering about breeding strategies, kicking the bulls out for 30 days, preg checking, and then rebreeding anything that comes up open and selling as pairs.
So we do rebreed every year. The one thing that we don't rebreed is our open bred heifers, and the fact that you have a premium feeder heifer, and there is normally feedlot. When you sell a pregged open heifer, feedlots go crazy about it, especially if you can kind of put a pot load together. They will outbid spayed heifers, and there's a premium associated with them. So any animal that does come up open at Wineglass, we do, other than a bred heifer, we do put the bulls back in. We have a herd of terminal bulls that we like to use, and we'll expose them with our terminal bulls. I will say that we can sell, when we sell our culls, there is a good market for it. We have repeat buyers. So it could be unique to us, but we do rebreed, and it seems to work 9 years out of 10, and 2 or 3 of those that seems to work very, very well.
What's on the 1 year out of 10 that it doesn't work? What's the issue?
The floor falls out of the market.
And it would have been better to just liquidate that cow when she came open.
Yeah.
Yeah. Miles, can you remember the question? You want me to reread her for you?
No, we got her. So yeah, there's a few guys in this country that calve in January. So they'll breed cows for 40 days, pull bulls, preg check, and rebreed those cows, because a lot of them are the second calvers. They're just some really good cows that just don't quite catch, and then sell them into the bred sales later on that year, because they don't fit their program, but they fit a lot of other people's April 1st program. So that is where the money is. The cow-calf pair thing, I don't know if there's as much money in it up here as there is in selling the good bred cows that just don't quite fit your program after your opens.
Cool. So I think I'll take this opportunity. So apologies, Doug and Logan and our American viewers. I do want to follow up with you guys. Logan, I kind of prefaced this. I heard you on another podcast talking about hedging. I think that would be interesting to talk about. And Doug, would love to get your final thoughts on the kind of the risk aversion standpoint. But Miles, you're very obviously well connected in the cattle industry. Lots of interest in livestock price insurance with the prices the way they are. I'm just wondering if you can give us kind of an update, or for those people that there's just not a lot of information about the livestock price insurance. If you'd be able to give us kind of a summary and what you're seeing as far as opportunity or changes coming.
We've had several presentations by AFSC on the price insurance, and we've been working on changes, and there's been some pilot programs because they need to change it a fair little bit. They had to have it, more days when you can settle, more openness on where the price is coming from and in what week in the fall. And so they've made a lot of changes that'll make it easier for a payout on, if there's an issue. One of the things, the uptick is really down. Well, the market has been ratcheting forward for, over 12 months now. So this spring, people are sitting back, seeing what the price insurance was, thinking, well, we're not going to get involved because it looks like the futures look a lot better. So a lot of people laid back, and without participation in this WLPIP or price insurance, you just don't get a good fix on it. But with AFSC making these changes, we're hoping that the spring of 2025 will enable people to get involved. There was issues as far as disasters. So in the event of, foot and mouth, heaven forbid, or anything like that, people thought they would be covered to the nines, but you will not get a payout until the market returns. And that's a real tough strategy because, it could be a year, it could be half a year, it could be months, so yeah, it's kind of a scary thing. So until the business risk management part of that is worked out, it makes it a little bit tough on people getting involved with the price insurance.
Can I ask, Miles, do you utilize it on your farm?
We have, a few years ago, we don't use it as much. We use the moisture deficiency insurance because it seems like with the drought situation and different areas, we're able to maybe get a little more help out of that program versus the price insurance on the calves. And with the acres we run and with the amount of grass we have, there is more of an opportunity to mitigate risk on that side. And if we can buy feed, maybe ride out the market a little bit if we do get in a drought situation.
What if you were a guy like me, Miles, that was expanding? Would you see people that are say they're buying a couple hundred cows at $4,000 and there's a pile of risk in market risk involved in that? Do you see that as a value going into next spring that, hey, at least we can cover a bit of market risk here?
Well, yes, it is. And I believe that most of our financial institutions like to have a blanket or some type of a floor. And if you can show your price insurance and that you're mitigating your risk, that's always a better opportunity when you are forking out a lot of money to buy these cattle. If you can, do that and also forward price or use some options to make sure that you are hedging any type of possible falls in the market.
Perfect segue. It's like you knew that was coming. Logan, do you want to follow up on that point for your context and just give us a bit of understanding as far as what you do from a market risk standpoint?
Sure. So we're not fixed on anything we do, and in that marketing in general, I put out my first. I talked to my broker today actually, and I put out my first sell order on feeder cattle in the last 4 years. So we're going to start slowly hedging and roll out of. We were using LRP, which is an option to kind of ride it up. The last hedge I had was on the 2020 crop, and we're gonna start to kind of hedge and anticipate. I know this thing is going to drop. I'm sure of it. Like everyone said, though, it's just I don't know the year. I don't know the time, and so we're going to start to roll into more hedges and use less option to kind of protect as we get into the stockers. I have way less risk when I produce that calf and then sell that calf over to the stocker enterprises. When you start buying stockers on a large scale, you're exposing yourself to a lot more risk, and then we typically use hedging to try to ride the market down.
Cool. Doug, you're free to take this however or whatever direction you want, but just risk mitigation.
Sell buy. And I'm not joking when I say this, if somebody tripped a breaker in Chicago tomorrow and the board didn't open, I wouldn't even know, except everybody else in the sale barn would be panicking. The only thing that matters to me is the price relationships that exist in the sawdust. These auction markets that we have, they're the closest thing left to laissez-faire free market capitalism. And that's exactly what allows some young guy like me when I started, 25 years ago, with $7,000 and turned it into a 7-figure business, is basically price discovery and taking advantage of those price relationships. LRP is a big question, and I shut that thing down right at the start of every one of my marketing schools because it's a question that every class has. We wouldn't be able to afford it in the States if it wasn't government subsidized. And the government doesn't subsidize things that are good for us to do. I mean, that's the shortest answer I can give on it.
Well, the government doesn't subsidize our program a whole lot, does it, Miles?
Well, not at all on the price on the calf insurance side. No, the crop insurance side they do, but nothing. Where it's free market. We're pretty much ranchers looking after our own deal.
Guys, I'm wondering maybe Doug, I'll start with you. I am curious the answer, but hearing a lot of people talking about selling maybe overvalued bred cows or whatever it is, something overvalued, and then buying back in obviously something undervalued, but what happens? I mean, Doug, you're obviously a well thought out person. I'm sure you're 8 steps ahead, but what happens if the buyback process, like what you're bringing in, is too expensive? At what point does it come to, is it a better management decision to stockpile grass or buy feed and wait for a better opportunity?
You know, that's a real popular thought that's out there amongst some other people that teach sell by marketing schools, but I'll also tell you they don't do sell by marketing. They just want to capitalize on some tuition from doing the schools. In all these decades I've done sell by marketing, I've never not been able to do a trade within a week. And it does come down to, you know, resource management. You got to have the feed. And I'll give an example. There is a guy just across the state line from me on the Kansas side, came through the school last year. And he was one of those guys that spent a lot of money on bulls, was very concerned about his genetics, you know, building his program up for years and years. And we're going into this drought in 23, and he had to cull cows to match his available forage base. And when he went through the school, one of the things I talk about is sell by can alleviate the burden of a drought. Sell by is a head for head. So he actually culled deeper into his cow herd to do the head per head trade. And he bought stockers, you know, since they eat less than cows. Probably a little bit of a stroke of good luck. The market went up as much as it did in 23. When he stole those stockers coming off grass, they were overvalued to bred cows. So he went from pairs to stockers, sold the stockers, went back into breds, bought some fall calving cows, calved them, sold them as pairs, then bought spring calving cows. And I got a text from him at the end of the year, and he says, doing these sell by trades, I've made more money than I've ever made before, and did it during a drought.
That's nice to hear. So Logan, same exact question, but it is some interesting context for you just because you're actually, you are selling and doing the buyback thing. Just wondering, I guess your process or concerns, or is it something that you have thought of where, hey, maybe it's a time to stockpile feed?
Well, you know, again, we're pulling in from the feed yards mainly is what we'll be doing. It's when you're writing this thing up, you could do anything and look good. You can custom feed cattle and you know, in a rising market, it makes you look brilliant. So we're pulling out of that, and that's going to be number one. We grew way too big for our resource base. So we are going to be doing more stockpiling of grass and more utilizing our forage resource here at home. And we are going to have more grass. And we wrote this thing down in 2016. We started buying stockers on a large scale. And you know, when you hit the bottom, it's hard to know when you hit the bottom. You want to have your feed resource available to kind of write it back up again. And we kind of got that right last time. And our resource base in 2016 was ready to sustain a lot of ballers that we bought on the cheap in the fall of 16.
Cool. Miles, you want to take a stab at that?
Can you repeat that question again? I was so enthralled with what Logan had to say.
So the question was, if you are, say, selling $4,500 bred cows and you're looking to get back in, but everything seems expensive, at what point do you say, hey, I'm going to take the money and wait, stockpile resources before actually the buyback comes back in?
Well, what we do that in that point in time, I think we just keep the heifers back, you know, and then if the cows 4,500, these calves would be bringing an enormous amount of money. When, like I said earlier, we wouldn't need to sell as many to make your payments and do all that stuff. So we're not in it on the buy and sell side of it. We're in it to try to maintain the cow herd, try to utilize, you know, the ranch the way it's been. And, but we would keep our own heifers at that point in time and do it. I think we're going to be on the buy and sell side of it this year because we already moved them, and we're going to buy some of these bred cows, or hopefully we will. And if not, we might pop back into a set of heifers. But the bred cow side is what we're going to try to do.
Cool. Well, you guys, I've done a decent job, not bad getting through these questions. So I think what I want to do is kind of ask an all-encompassing question. Just what excites you? What you're kind of looking at heading forward from what you're making investments in, and just kind of what you kind of see as the future, or what the next 3 to 5 years is bringing in the cattle industry. And then just a side note, if you got Doug, I know you've got a school. If you want to have a chance to talk about that a little bit as far as what's going on. Obviously, it's enthralling what you're talking about, this sell by marketing. But yeah, if there's anywhere we can follow you guys on socials, or if you're on podcast, feel free to plug it. But maybe Logan, I'll start with you. What excites you the next 5 years of what's going on your ranch and just in the cattle market in general?
Tell you that if you have too many cows, it's very, very expensive. And I'm really looking forward to right sizing the cow herd and trying to get to where we have it's very profitable, very cheap for us to run cows as a follow-up to our stocker operation. And when you have the right amount of cows, they can be run very, very cheaply. Most ranches, their number one problem is they have too many cows, or too many stockers, or too many. You just at all times, you need to balance. This is Bud Williams. Probably learned it at Doug's school, but you need to balance your grass, your money, and your cattle. 90% of ranches just have too many cattle. They don't like their grass, and they don't like their cash. So I'm looking forward to getting balanced, and I really do like stockers. The last time I was into stockers on a big scale, I was not doing the buy sell. I was in the Gap 4 program, and the premiums were not consistent enough. And I'm looking forward to trying out. I need to go to Doug's school again. I said an employee a couple years ago, but looking forward to going to stockers on a big scale. I really like stockers. I like how you turn your money quick. When you grow your cow herd, it's a cash flow suck thing. And I do love running stockers just personally. I'm a grass man first and foremost. And it's really cool to be able to use stockers to more fully utilize your grass. We use a managed grazing system, mid grazing, and doing it with stockers is just a lot easier. So what I'm really excited about is selling out of the cows, getting back into stockers, quicker turn on the cash, better management of your grass, and then just having a small enough cow herd where it just is a scavenger herd, and it just goes and it cleans up what the stockers left behind in the corn stalks. And yeah, that's what I'm most excited about. And what I'm most excited about in the next 5 years is buying a heifer calf for under $1,000.
Hey, mute him. You got to mute him.
I'll give you the plug then, Logan, too. I listened to it's not the Herd Quitter podcast. What's the new name? Team Ranch? No.
It was Jared is Ranching Returns.
Ranching Returns. Yeah, that was an awesome podcast. So anyone out there, I know a lot of people that are on the webinar tonight are religious listeners anyway, but that was an awesome podcast. I thought you did a great job. Doug, how about you? What excites you about the cattle industry the next 5 years?
So teaching the marketing schools I've learned a lot from the feedback and the questions that I get. So it gives me a much different perspective, looking forward. And probably the thing that gets me the most excited is when I get testimonials from somebody and they're like, "Oh, you wouldn't believe this trade my kid did." And I'm like, "Really? That kid that was sitting in the back of the room looked like he wasn't paying attention?" But I tell you, some of these kids that I've got to meet the last several years are, damn impressive. And, we need somebody to take the reins and carry this industry forward. It's been around since the time of Cain and Abel, and we always hear, "Oh, it's a dying deal. You can't make any money at it." But when I was on that webinar with Jared Sorensen about, I don't know, it's been maybe a month or so ago, I made the comment on there that a legacy isn't what you leave your kids, it's what you leave in your kids, because they have to be able to take over and manage that ranch after, we're done.
Doug, do you want to take just 30 seconds and talk about what schools you got coming up and I guess how people can register?
So you can find all the dates there on mrcattlemmaster.com. And we've got several dates already set for 2025 in Beatrice, Nebraska. And we're currently working on setting up some others on the road. And I hope I ain't getting too far ahead of myself when I say this, but there's a lot of red tape to come to Canada. And we're trying to cut through a lot of that red tape right now. Our best friend neighbor to the north, but our government's put so many roadblocks in the way of me coming to Canada for that. But I'd like to get up there sometime. And then there's also the Doug's Market Intel that goes up on all the Farm Progress websites. You can find it on Beef Magazine or Beef Producer. And that's all I write about is strictly just sell by marketing. And here for probably the rest of the year, I'm going to be addressing a lot of the myths that are flying around about sell by.
Well, Doug, if there's something we can do to help get you up to Canada, let us know. We'll do what we can. We can sneak in a tote bag of seed if that works.
That's about what I'm going to have to do, I think, is sneak in.
It's not hard. I live 6 miles from the border. We do it all the time.
If I do a school up there, I got to pay taxes in Canada and I got to pay taxes in the States. And there's just so many regulations to cut through. It's unreal.
We love taxes in Canada. Absolutely.
Yeah, we love them here too.
Miles, what are you excited about? 5 years?
My family involvement, really, for so many years, I perfected holistic management on this grass. And, we rotate cattle and make sure that we only get a couple of bites on the grass and move on. We've worked on water and we've run water lines. We got a well every mile. We run water lines another mile or more, from fresh water is such an important part. And working with my kids and showing them the solar pump systems and working on all those things. My grandkids or my grandson right now, 6 generations on our place. And, and hopefully, knock on wood, we got another one coming in December and hopefully a lot more after that. So what excites me about the cattle industry is just working with my kids and working with family and, riding the ups and downs and making sure that, they're the healthiest they could be. As I was telling you earlier, our steers were 50 pounds heavier this year weaning. We have an April 1st calving date, 45-day period. And, November 10th, November 12th, those steers were 760 pounds, on the average. That's a pretty good shot. So we really work on doing the best job we can with what we have and utilizing the grass and using cover crops to really utilize the grazing into the fall. We get the green feed in the summer and we really get a good growth, and Covers & Co has been an amazing partner that way, showing us these really good cover crops and working with them. And the horses, after the cattle are done, the horses go through and graze. And I've probably rolled on a little too much, but the cattle industry, I think, is going to be alive and well for, the next couple of years because of the shortage of cattle. Our export markets are through the roof, and so are the American export markets, and nobody is retaining them. The beef on dairy, we didn't even touch on today, but they're filling the bunk spaces that our domestic cattle aren't doing right now because there's so many people getting out of the cattle industry and our aging population of cattle ranchers. So anything else I can do Wolf Ranch, we put out a calendar, so I'll flash that. But nice. My daughter and son and everybody involved, we put this out and we export a lot of saddle horses, and we deal with ranchers from all over North America. And we're excited about the cattle industry on the highs and the lows.
Well, I'll tell you guys, it seems like forever ago, but we started Covers & Co. It's been 5 years. I've been touring across Western Canada and unmatched the optimism in the industry, which was it needed a shot in the shoulder. And hearing young people talk about investing in livestock and new management, it is so exciting the next 5 years, whether prices stay high or not. It's just,
Yep.
it's nice to hear excitement back in the voices of the producers and the young people who are the next generation, who we absolutely need. Them seeing a future in this industry is just so exciting and a well-needed shot in the arm for sure. So thanks you guys, everyone. Awesome input. We had some great questions. I thank you guys for your time.